And now, ladies and gentlemen,
Put your thumbs up and say it's Tickety Boo.
Tickety Boo.
Tickety Boo, Tickety Boo, everything's Tickety Boo.
Tickety Boo, son. Tickety Boo.
Tickety Boo!
Welcome back to another episode of Tickety Boo. I'm here with Iona, Ian and Barney, and today we're going to be talking about future-based anxiety. That thing where you constantly feel like your brain is auditioning for a future disaster that hasn't happened yet. And I think a lot of us spend time trying to avoid fear and anxiety and focusing on the worst things. So today we're going to have a bit of a roundtable chat about it. Can you remember a point in your life where you've been so focused on what you don't want to have happen, even though there's no sign of it actually happening, and you've created all this anxiety and stress around the narrative you've been telling yourself? I was an expert at it, but I'll go to you guys first.
What's that to me?
Well, I'm not someone who's necessarily struggled with anxiety to the level that you have, Andy. And even though I'm someone who appears very confident, and I am, I've had moments where I've felt discomfort, like going into new situations where generally I'm fine, I can just go in, and part of my coping mechanism, which I would have when I was younger, well, a lot of that would be drink too much, but it was, so that social anxiety is like meeting new people. I can talk the talk, but sometimes inside I can be a little uncomfortable, but I don't have it to the same sense as like my younger brother had debilitating anxiety. It was painful watching him not wanting to interact even when he was little. Social interactions were so hard for him, and he did what some people of our listeners might be familiar with, which was masking. Once he was an adult, he would put so much energy trying just to be there, he would just be exhausted and have to go to sleep. And it was really interesting because we've all got it, my siblings and I, to different levels. I've probably got the least amount, and my other brother. And I'd say that it's more, I've seen it from the social aspect. And as I was sharing earlier, when I was driving over here, I was listening to an audiobook, and people who struggle with social anxiety, actually around 90-ish percentage of students struggle with social anxiety and going into new situations. They're in a new environment, they're doing something new. That's incredible. And then and just under 50% of adults struggle with social anxiety at some point in their life. I think it was about 47 or 49%. But that means that, and I said it on the other show, that generally 50% of people in the room may be having that same fear that you're having, that same overwhelm, that fear of, will I say the right thing? Will I say the wrong thing? And it was really great as if you can, the advice it gave, and I'd love to hear if this would ring true for you, is that instead of worrying about the thing that's coming up, worrying about how will I say the right thing, and will I fall flat on my face, will I be accepted, oh, I'm so uncomfortable, knowing that most people are also feeling like that, is instead of having the onus on you, is you can put it on the other person and focus on them. How can I make them feel more comfortable? So you start asking questions, and I know it can be really difficult for people who have a lot of anxiety initially, but show an interest in the other person, so you build the safe space.
Yeah, I think the fundamental building blocks, in my opinion, of future-based anxiety all feeds back into what-ifs. Mm-hmm. It's all the what-if scenarios that we keep running. So if we look at health anxiety, for example, the what-if there is, what if this twinge is a heart attack? What if I find a lump and it turns out that it's cancer? What if this happens? What if that happens? But then you take it away from health anxiety. If it's just generalized anxiety, what if I go to the supermarket and I lose control and I have a panic attack? What if I go to work and none of my colleagues like me and I'm riddled with anxiety and I don't know what to say? It all boils back down to the stories that we're telling ourselves and the catastrophizing that we're doing over future-based events. So what we do is we go, what if? We project ourselves, we almost like we're watching a movie of that in our mind. We then start to feel all the anxiety from that, and we're doing all this anxious thinking, and then we go, I know, I'm going to use this anxious thinking that I've created the problem with to now try and resolve the problem. And every time you look at a solution, your anxiety gives you back another 100 reasons why it should go wrong. So you come up with another solution, and it keeps coming up with it. It's like anxious thinking is not going to fix anxious thoughts. And it's about stepping back and putting a space between you and the thing. So if you just even say to yourself inside your head, this is just my anxiety and this moment will pass, and put in a separation between you and what you're experiencing in that moment. I mean, they always say, never make any decisions when you're in a state of high emotion, whatever that is. If you're ever thinking about buying something and you're wrapped up in the reward system, pleasure hormones, of purchasing something, step back for 24 hours and see how it feels. And if it still feels right then, when you're anxious, don't make key decisions or trust your thinking at that moment, because the one thing that we do know for absolute certainty is your anxiety lies to you consistently. What I mean by that, it's not actually lying to you, it's telling you the worst case scenario. And normally what you find is, in order for it to feel so bad, it has to be far removed from your reality. In order for it to feel so scary. So if you think you're going to go forwards and you're going to die, if you were close to death, it's not going to be as bad, if that kind of makes sense. But if you deem yourself to be quite sort of healthy and you don't really know you've got any health issues, and suddenly you think about dying, it's a 180-degree flip from your reality just now, and that's why the anxiety feels so bad. So when you're in that moment of what ifing and it feels really, really bad, it's because it's so far removed from your reality, the contrast between the two, your brain is struggling to deal with it. So you don't control your anxiety by trying to reason with the what ifs. You can offer alternatives to it, but you can't battle with the what ifs, because you'll never win.
So from what I was listening to on the audiobook, then that's the next stage, because initially the person is battling with the what ifs.
Yeah, they're not dealing with the now.
Yeah.
They're dealing with something that they think might happen, may probably never happen. But the thing is, when you actually really ended up in that situation, it would feel totally different. Like, we've all had things in our lives that have happened to us that have been unpleasant and all the rest of it. If you went out and had a bump in your car and it was quite a bad one, you've dealt with it at that time in the best you knew how to at that moment. If I said to you 3 months before, one day over the next 3 months, you're going to have a bad prang in your car, you would immediately go into what if, and what if I'm really injured, how am I going to feel? And you would try to manage that. But the reality is, when you're in the actual situation, you'll deal with it far better than you think you will. Yeah. So deal with what you know, not with what you don't know. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you're trying to control something that hasn't even happened yet. So this future anxiety is this control issue where we like to feel we've got this perception of control. And in reality, how much control do we really have? Really? We can't control the weather. We can't really control the government, the relationship with the government and they make. You can't control if your partner decides to leave you. You can't control if your company decide to lay you off. So how much control do we really have other than our responses to these things that we think? That's the only thing we can truly control. Mm-hmm. So, future-based anxiety, I think we live in quite anxious times, and for a lot of people there's a lot of uncertainty at the moment. But trying to project yourself forwards is not the solution. It's been in the now.
Yeah. So do you think anxiety is more about fear or the unknown?
The fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
Or even fear of fear.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I get to that situation, that's going to feel absolutely awful. How am I going to deal with that? So, you're activating all of your internal security systems, but it hasn't happened yet. And it may not ever happen. But you're starting to think, feel and behave as though it's your actual reality. And the problem with that is when you're so focused on that, you're in danger of actually starting to gravitate towards that outcome because thoughts become things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at health anxiety, a little twinge in your body, if you focus on that, your mind will lock onto it and it'll start to create symptoms and search for evidence to support your experience.
Yeah.
You know, so what ifing? What if this happens? What if that happens? You know, if you find yourself saying I say this to my clients in the therapy room, red flag language. What if? I think, maybe. If you capture yourself saying those things to yourself, it's a fact that your brain's about to start making a whole load of stuff up. Rather than, I know. You know, there's a big difference between the two.
Do you think it's easy to always spot your anxiety in different
No.
forms? I was going to say,
Yeah.
I generally think I know when I'm anxious
Yeah.
because my brain will tell me something, and normally it's about the people, relationships, and what people think of me, which now
Yeah.
stems back to things we spoke about previously. But you get that obvious sense of anxiety, and then you get underlying anxiety that could be disguised as procrastination or something like that.
Yeah.
So
You know, fundamentally, it's coming from the stories we tell ourselves, our past failures, or things we see happening to other people. You know, I see a lot of people in the therapy room where actually it's nothing they've experienced, but somebody close to them has been through something, and now they're really afraid of it happening to them. I'm actually working with somebody at the moment who lost both of their parents quite closely together to cancer, and now they're terrified of the same thing happening to them. So they're absolutely riddled with health anxiety. But when you know how our internal security system works, and when it sees something and goes, oh God, that would be terrible if that happened to us, I need to protect you from that, then you start looking at all the signs and symptoms and you try to manage that situation. Now, you'd like to think it's not going to happen to you, but the way you have to think about it is it's not happening to me right now, and I've got to focus on the things I can control, which is being as healthy as I can, you know, looking after myself. If I do see anything that I am worried about, dealing with it as early as possible. But the mind is acting in a way as though they've been sat down and given a diagnosis of something.
yeah. I'm working with two people at the moment, both young people, and they've both got health anxiety coming out of COVID. You know, they've been fed all these images of death and despair, and they just can't shake it off. That's now what's in their head, and it's crippling. I look at them and I think I'd love to be young and in shape, you know, in the same shape you are.
Yeah.
But yet they are there with a fear of, you know, terminal illness or dropping down dead.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, wow, you know, you're in your early 20s,
thing is-
late teens, early 20s.
The future can't scare you if you're focused on now.
Yeah.
Yep.
It really can't. And, you know, if you look at how our brains operate, it's either there or it's here. You know, you can't think two things at the same time. Yeah. So your future-based anxiety is a state shift problem. And what I mean by that is you are not present. So a lot of people that do future-based anxiety, their state shift is the shoulders will go forward, the head will go down, and they go inside, and they're up in stories inside themselves. And there'll be stuff going on in the room around them, the family's around, the telly's on, or the colleagues are about, and they've tuned out from that. They're not in the now. You know, if you're up inside your head and you're like worried about something happening a year or 3 years or 5 years from now, and you're in the story, you know, you've put yourself into that movie, then I walk up to you and go, congratulations, you've got the winning lottery ticket, go get the money. That story gets abandoned immediately. Yeah. Quite a radical contrast, but you get what I'm saying. I rip you out of that story and pull you into another one. Suddenly all those health issues have gone. Yeah. So it's this, you've got to protect your state. Yeah. Even if you are worried about, let's just say, I don't know, the company that you're working for says that they're going through a series of redundancies and you don't know if you're going to be one of those and they're going to be happening in 6 months or whatever it is. Your brain immediately goes to, we've been told, we're one of the ones, I'm going to be laid off, I'm going to lose the house, my wife's going to leave me, I'm going to have no money, I'm going to be on the streets. And you're like, well, hang on a minute, You've just jumped forwards about 27 steps. Yeah. Come back to the step you're at the moment, which is, what do you know? Our organisation are considering redundancies, but they haven't decided who, and there's a time delay. Work with that. So what can I control now? Well, maybe I'll start looking at my options, looking at other opportunities, reminding myself I may or may not be one of those people that's picked as part of that redundancies. Maybe actually this is an opportunity in my life to do something else and become more solutions focused rather than leaping into impending doom and trying to control something that hasn't happened yet. Loads of anxiety comes around from controlling what you can't control.
Yeah, I definitely say that my brother who died, all the anxieties and every element you've talked into it, I just touched on the social anxiety. He definitely had all those, he was always struggling with, I've got this illness and that illness. It was just endless, and he didn't see a way out. And that shows us that when it can spiral and someone can't see a way out because they're so fixated on the future, but they see no future, they see no way out.
Yeah. And the thing is, maybe it is something real. It's something that's coming down the line towards you, right? Is your anxiety sort of says to you, I need to figure this out now, today, in this moment. Let's come up with the answer. And, normally at that point, we were talking earlier about when you're operating from that back part of your brain, the quality of thinking's never good. Your rational prefrontal cortex is out of the game. Actually, okay, well, if there's a big problem coming down the line towards you, the way that you do anxiety is by showing control and constraint, by breaking it down into small, manageable sections. Like, right, acknowledgement, this is happening. What's one thing I can do today to start to move the dial a bit, to start to make changes? Do I need to get advice? Is there action I need to take? Is there things I can start doing now to mitigate this? Because your anxiety is going to always jump to that worst case scenario, not because it wants to torture you, because actually it goes, I want to protect you from that. In order to do it, I need to put the floodlights on it. So it's really got your attention, but then you go, okay, you've got my attention, but we're not there yet now, back into the moment. But you've got to be really aware of, with future-based anxiety, you are up inside your head. Your thoughts are creating uncomfortable feelings inside of you, and then your feelings are creating disempowering behaviours. Yeah. So stepping outside of your head, sometimes it's putting it all down on paper. What's going on with you?
Well, that's it. So, sometimes when your anxiety is trying to trick you into thinking that you're just being prepared, or you're just getting ready for an upcoming situation, the truth is it's just your mind tricking you into overthinking.
Yeah,
So
I mean, no one is immune from this stuff. No one is. I can give you a real world example. In our world, it's tax return time at the time of recording this episode, right? It's the time where you get all your paperwork and you hand it to your accountant and you wait for an email coming back going, that's how much you owe the taxman after I've done all your calculations. I think most people, not all, but a lot of people will go, oh my God, what am I going to do if that comes back and I owe them thousands and I haven't got that money, and then they're going to come after me and then this is going to happen. You're like, whoa, the accountant hasn't even received it yet. Yeah. Not even at that point yet. And I noticed as soon as I submitted my stuff as soon as my accountant asked me for the stuff, which was in like October, that little devil on your shoulder, there's this trouble coming down the line, and the story started, but I was aware of the story and like, behave. But even when the email came back in from my accountant going, here's your calculations, the little devil went, see, when you open this email, that's it, it's the beginning of disaster. I actually opened the email and got a pleasant surprise. It was considerably less than I thought I was going to have to pay. And the reason I can manage that whole process now is because I'm very aware of the stories I'm up inside my head telling myself. It's awareness. It's not trying to escape what your anxiety does for you. that's a natural instinct. These internal protective mechanisms, your internal security guard, your bodyguard, is always going to go and try and do that. The problem you've got is you've got to work with the system rather than fighting the system. That's where you get yourself into trouble. Surefire way to create more anxiety is to fight your anxiety. It's like, if you were to go down to one of the beaches in the UK, like Newquay or something, surfing, and there's a great wave, jump on the surfboard and ride the wave. It's just an anxiety wave, because that wave is going to rise, it's going to peak, and then it's going to drop, which is what your anxiety is going to do. When you turn around and fight it, it's like pointing your board into the wave and try and swim against the wave. It's going to batter you about a good bit. It's okay to feel anxiety. Anxiety is there to help you. It starts as a message. It's when you go from experiencing anxiety to doing anxiety. That's where you get yourself into trouble. And you're doing anxiety by telling yourself stories, creating realities that aren't happening, and then trying to create. How can you control something that hasn't happened yet? What am I going to do if they leave me? What am I going to do if I lose my job? What am I going to do if I lose all my money? Is there any evidence to support any of that? No, but that doesn't matter. Doesn't mean it can't happen. Yeah, but it's not happening. And people go, it's not that simple. And you're like, no, it is. People get quite, in the therapy room, they're like, you make it sound so easy, but in reality it's not like that. And I'm like, no, it is. I'm not saying it's easy to do, but you've got to be consistent in your approach to dealing with your anxieties and the story you tell yourself. At one point in my life, I was constantly anxious about failing and not being able to fix whatever it is I failed at. I couldn't actually give you any context of like what could go wrong. In my other business, at one point, my brain was always going, what are you going to do if like a piece of equipment breaks, or, and the show can't go ahead and all the rest of it? And that used to create a lot of anxiety. And I go, it's okay, we've got contingencies for that. We actually have a strategy in place to deal for that exact scenario. We've planned for it. Thanks. Bugger off anxiety. Next.
Yeah.
And I can guarantee you, 85% of the things you worry about will never happen. And even if they do, they're going to be radically different than the way that you think about it. So future-based anxiety is normally you doing anxiety, not you experiencing anxiety. I think some ministers might struggle that. Experiencing anxiety, somebody jumps out the shadows and terrifies you, that's you experiencing anxiety. Thinking there might be somebody in the shadows that's coming to get you, that's you doing anxiety. And you've got to learn to the fact, am I up inside my head solving problems, or am I up inside my head creating problems right now? If I'm creating problems, stop it. We'll do it. We all do it. So I know it's a biggie, and I know sometimes oversimplify it, but if you look at the mechanics of how it works and you interrupt the mechanics of the thought process and the what-ifing and recognizing what you're doing and bringing yourself back into the moment, most people just need to distract themselves in that moment or go and do something different to what they're doing. If you're lying in your bed plotting the world's worst disaster movie inside your head that just happens to be your life, get up and go and do something else instead. Yeah. Or whatever you're doing at that point, or what you have been doing, has led you to that place of anxiety. There's clues in there. Change what you're doing. But it's look after your state. Am I in the moment? Am I present? Is this happening to me right now? Is there any evidence to support it? And if there is, what can you do? Take action. But you're very rarely going to think yourself out of the problem. There's action involved in it. So if you're struggling with future anxiety, start to think about, when do you spiral? What are you spiraling about? Where's the evidence? What can you do to it? And also, one of the best things you can do is, right now I'm experiencing a whole load of anxiety, and this moment will pass, and deal with it when the anxiety's tailed off a bit, not when you're in the eye of the storm. Have you guys got anything you kind of want to feed in on the back end of it? I mean, I think we've all been in it.
Yeah, you've covered it.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, I know. It's one of those episodes we've had a few messages about and stuff, but stop worrying about the future, focus on the now, because weirdly the future has a way of sorting itself out. You don't need to know the answers normally. There's something nudging you in the right direction. Well, there you go. Future anxiety. From future anxiety to future episodes. Thanks very much for watching. Whatever platform you're on, please click that like or subscribe button, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
If you or someone close to you needs to access mental health support, please contact your GP, or if it's out with normal office hours, get in touch with NHS 24 on 111. Alternatively, contact the Samaritans on 116 123. All calls are free of charge from any phone. You can also find more support information on the Tickety Boo website, ticketyboopodcast.co.uk.